Choosing well can be quite the challenge, and in many cases, seemingly modest claims paper over philosophically interesting complications. Consider, for instance, the idea that one should not sweat the small stuff, or more formally, that one should treat trivial effects as trivial. This seems like solid or at worst superfluous advice, but when you think about it, not sweating the small stuff can be a recipe for disaster. Why? Because big stuff is made of small stuff, and presumably we should sweat the big stuff, which suggests that we really should sweat the small stuff after all. Consider some examples familiar from everyday life on the many ways in which we often voluntarily inch toward terrible results. We eat too much, save too little, and wreak havoc on the environment. But in many cases, each step toward unhealthy weight gain, destitution, and environmental destruction seems trivial in terms of making things worse than they are. This book focuses on the challenges associated with effective choice over time. Its contributions are meant to be of both theoretical and practical interest, and indeed to illustrate the power of theoretical models in illuminating debate about practical problems. I focus in particular on the challenges raised by cyclic preferences and by preference gaps. My guiding questions in this book are the following. What is an agent to do if she finds herself with cyclic preferences or with preference gaps? Is an agent with such preferences necessarily irrational? In my view, the answer to the latter question is no. Rationality does not invariably prohibit disorderly preferences, but it does, to get back to the first question, prompt us to proceed with caution and with a readiness to show restraint, based on awareness of larger dynamics when our preferences are disorderly. Theories of rational choice often dismiss or abstract away from the sorts of disorderly preferences that I focus on. They assume that rational agents can and should have neat preferences over their options. But this assumption is problematic. As I will explain, rationality can validate certain disorderly preference structures while also protecting us from self-defeating patterns of choice. Ultimately, my reasoning regarding cyclic preferences and preference gaps leads me to a revisionary way of understanding instrumental rationality. In particular, my reasoning supports the conclusion that the subjective appraisal responses to which instrumental rationality is accountable go beyond the appraisal responses captured by an agent's preferences, which are the only subjective appraisal responses recognized by standard conceptions of instrumental rationality. They also include what I call categorical subjective appraisal responses. Recognition of these additional responses is important for properly understanding the major pitfall associated with disorderly preferences, and for seeing how it can be averted.